Let's move on to marijuana. I had to put this one in the show. Dave Portnoy kicked the hornet's nest, I guess, on Twitter. He recently put out a video endorsing the Florida Amendment 3, which would legalize marijuana in the state. Let's take a listen.
Listen, it's Sunday afternoon. Football on TV, pizza on the way. In Massachusetts, smoking a little weed, just enjoying my day. Florida, you can't do this. In my Miami house, you can't do this. Why? Freedom. It's about freedom. Half the states allow this. Legal marijuana. Florida. I want to be able to watch football, eat pizza, and smoke. We're all adults here, 21 plus. Make your own decisions. It's on the ballot. Vote yes on 3. Legalize recreational weed. Come on, where are we, Florida? Wake up. Wake up. Don't tell other people what to do in their own house. We're grown adults. It's safe. It's legal. Over half the states in the country have it. Why don't we in Florida? I'm a Florida resident. I want to be able to smoke in my house, watching football, eating pizza like a human. I can do it in Massachusetts. Make it legal. On ballot day, vote yes on 3 in Florida. Thank you.
All right.
Amen.
So,
Amen, brother.
Okay, this is bullshit because nobody in the state of Florida is getting arrested for smoking weed in their house. In fact, weed addicts, by the way, I put this out yesterday, if you all just stay home and eat pizza, be my guest. Nobody cares what you do at home. When you smoke outside, whenever you smoke behind the wheel of a car because it's chill, when you smoke around children in public parks, I think that's a problem. And that's the issue, is they think that it's fine to pollute public spaces, to light up outside. I just landed, by the way, recently at Denver Airport. People next to me are smoking weed while waiting for a rental car. We need to smoke weed while we're waiting for a rental car, while we're about to break the law. Everybody just thinks it's totally fine. We get behind the wheel and they're totally intoxicated. So frankly, this is a bullshit understanding of what legal weed would mean for the state of Florida, because it's really more about public consumption and being able to buy. Nobody's getting arrested at home. Nobody.
Myself
Zero.
and Dave Portnoy happen to believe in a little concept called freedom.
And
it's just sad that you don't believe in that, Saagar.
No one's violating your freedom at home.
Sad
Zero people.
that you don't believe in freedom. That's what's sad to me.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Like, it's just total propaganda by these weed heads. And who is coming to Dave Portnoy's Miami house and arresting them for marijuana? They won't even arrest you for blowing up cocaine. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Because the point is that that's not actually what is happening. What's happening is it would legalize high-potency THC, which would be widely available commercially in the state. It would be a boon for big banks, for venture capitalists. It would be regulated. It would be so regulated, like it is in Colorado,
now,
where teenagers
it's unregulated, it's more dangerous.
In the state of Colorado, high-potency THC is poisoning children. ER visits are up. They have massive amounts of traffic deaths, and the amount of tax revenue does not even compare to what they initially promised. It is almost certainly being overwhelmed in emergency services and higher police or public safety needs, and the entire city smells like shit. So if that's the trade that you would like in Miami Beach, in Tampa, in Jacksonville, by the way, I don't live in Florida. You people do whatever you want. I visit probably once a year, and I'm like, why did I come to this place exactly? So let's put this up there on the screen in terms of the polls. The polls currently disagree on the fate of Florida marijuana legalization initiative. Among those who have been surveyed, 66% said that they would vote yes. Only 33% would say no. I will just put it on the table. I don't generally make predictions. I think it is going to pass, just because I think marijuana legalization is unfortunately incredibly popular. So
it's very popular because most Americans agree with me and Dave Portnoy and believe in freedom.
Be my guest. You want to ruin the public? Go ahead.
Just a technical thing that it has to get 60% to pass, I believe is the margin. And so there was one poll from Florida Atlantic University that had it at 56%, but you still had some 15% who said that they didn't know how they would vote on the measures. I agree with you. I think it's pretty likely it'll pass. You had Trump come out and endorse it.
Trump is in favor.
Came out and backed it. So the more interesting thing to me, not that I don't always find your views on the topic very interesting, Saagar, but
thank you.
There's an interesting divide in the GOP coalition between the phenomenon you've talked about, the barstool conservatives, Dave Portnoy, of course, being chief among them, and the J.D. Vance style conservatives who are, social conservatives who are deeply concerned about like degeneracy and the decline of the culture, et cetera, et cetera. And there was a unifying, and there's still to some extent is, but part of what brought them together was this like backlash against democratic wokeness, right? And the like, the PC police and the policing of word language and all that stuff. And it sort of united them because the Portnoy types are like, leave me the fuck alone. Like, I'm going to say what I want to say. And the JD Vance types are like, they're, and I don't want to use him specifically, but that genre of conservative, it's not that they're so much opposed to some censorship or restrictions in their direction, but they didn't like that particular like liberal institutional wokeness being codified in corporations and those sorts of things because it's obviously on the other side of the culture war for them. So there was like a unifying theme there. The salience of that issue, I think anyone would say, has declined. It's not a major battleground in terms of this presidential election. It's not something Trump really ever talked about. Ron DeSantis really leaned into it. We saw how well that worked out for him, et cetera. And so you're getting more instances where this divide is on display. The other one that I can think of is the abortion argument where Portnoy came out and, was relatively pro-choice in his commentary. And there was, again, a backlash against him from more of the like, social conservative JD Vance wing of the party. And so that's actually what's interesting to me here about some of the backlash to Portnoy's comments is it exposes a fissure between the social conservatives and the barstool conservatives within the GOP coalition that hadn't been on huge display until, recently.
Let me take off my own hat and be descriptive. They're obviously more popular, like 10 times more. And in fact, this is the issue, is that—
By they, you mean the Barstool conservatives.
The Barstool people. I said this. I think Barstool conservatism will be the future. I think that is exactly what the GOP will eventually look like. There will have to be some Sister Soldier moment on abortion, or the abortion question will be just resolved by Democrats whenever they nationalize it, and the pro-life people can shut up forever. After that period, it's very likely that this is the direction that things will trend, just because it's way more popular. People are a lot more secular. They don't like telling people what to do. And if you notice, like, for example, let's put the other side of who these people might have in terms of their political talent, like Ron DeSantis. Yeah, Ron DeSantis is popular in Florida, but he lost massively in the GOP primary. And listen to the way that he talks about the issue. Let's take a listen. This was just yesterday.
And what I tell people is, your default on amending the Constitution should be no, right? They should have to prove to you a really high bar why you would put something in the Constitution which effectively can't be changed. Same thing with this Amendment 3. The Amendment 3, the media will refer to it as marijuana recreational legalization. That's not entirely true. It's a partial legalization because this has been put in by basically one big weed company that spent $75–80 million. And yes, they write in there that you have a right to possess and use up to 3 ounces of marijuana, which the law enforcement tells me maybe 50 to 100 joints. So that's more than any other state in the country. So they're putting that in the Constitution. So yes, you do have that right, but only if you buy it from them. You can't grow it in your backyard. You got to buy it from them. So they're creating in our Constitution a big weed cartel. And not only that, they're giving themselves protection from any civil liability at all. At any point in the distribution or cultivation process. That's not in the ballot summaries.
I mean, look, empirically he's right, but that's like the most boring way that you could possibly address this.
Well, it's also what I took note of is, like, when you just argued against it, you went at it directly. Basically,
exactly.
This is bad and here's why. You can tell he knows he's on losing ground because he makes all these like procedural arguments about like, well, maybe we shouldn't mess with the Constitution, which again isn't a weed specific argument. It's just like a, appeal to sort of tradition and sense of people's fear of change. Then he does this kind of jujitsu and like, oh, well, this is really a giveaway to corporations. None of it is a direct argument against the thing that people are actually voting on. And so to me, it's very telling that he knows, he's looking at these poll numbers. He knows he's not on, solid ground here in terms of public opinion, which is why he has to do all of these sort of ancillary arguments rather than making a direct appeal as you did.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is part of the problem. Let's continue in this vein. Let's put the next one up on the screen. Matt Walsh put out a tweet, says, can you point to any state or city where life has been in anywhere measurably improved after legalizing marijuana? Where are the success stories? Just give me one, please. But Jason Whitlock, kind of also crystallizing what you're talking about here. This is why single people and people without kids shouldn't vote. We tend to think selfishly with no concern to what we're leaving the next generation. Married people with kids should be the only voters. We should prioritize families. We want to fix our broken culture. Maybe you can agree or you can disagree, but that's not popular. I'll just put it that way. And that's the issue. We have to live in the realm of representative democracy. So look, you're correct. I made a very forthright argument about it. But a lot of people don't even want to talk about the issue or get into this whole people with kids shouldn't vote. The truth is that Portnoy is like a hedonist individualist. I would hope he does not take exception to that, because I would say that's descriptive. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That's a very popular thing. It's a very American character, actually. I don't necessarily agree with it whenever it comes to marijuana, but descriptively, it is so obvious to me that things are going in that direction. It also is why, for example, Portnoy, went after J.D. Vance about this idea of having higher taxes or whatever for people who are single. Why he also why it's very important. Remember that he was pro-Trump in 2015, not for policy positions, for, quote, telling it like it is. And so I always point to that. I think it's a very important precursor of where politics and all of that will trend. How someone can be simultaneously pro-choice and also pro-Trump, anti-woke, left and all of that. It seems incoherent if you think about politics in a 1990 sense, but in a 2024 sense, I actually think it's starting to make perfect sense.
Portnoy really is sort of the living embodiment of the antithesis of J.D. Vance's politics.
Yes, that's right. Right.
Putting aside, whatever policy proposals he puts out there, which, for example, on child tax credit, right? They had a child tax credit vote in the Senate and he didn't bother to show up for it. He certainly didn't lead the charge to reinstate the child tax credit after it expired, from the COVID era provisions, et cetera. And I think, and you can tell me, Saagar, because you know him and his ideology better than I do, that it's because he doesn't actually believe that policy is really central to the goals that he wants to accomplish. It's more about using culture to kind of enforce a certain cultural lifestyle that he thinks is the ideal based on his experience, his childhood, his religion, et cetera. And so, when J.D. Vance is out there talking about we need to punish the childless, or we need to, or flirting with this idea that Whitlock puts out there that, hey, your vote should count more if you have kids than if you don't. It's exactly because he thinks very negatively about the lifestyle that Dave Portnoy has chosen. And he thinks that should be effectively shamed, and I'm not trying to use that in an overly pejorative way, but effectively shamed out of existence or minimized. And yes, policy is one lever for that, but it's not just about rewarding people with families. It's about actively trying to disincentivize the lifestyle of Dave Portnoy. And so that's, part of what I was thinking about when you're hearing him talk about this and the way he's approaching it, smoking the blunt on the camera or whatever. It's very weird that person and J.D. Vance exist in the same party, because they are diametrically opposed in their view of the world and their approach to politics.
The only thing I would really quibble is that it's not about culture to culture. It's actually about policy to culture. So for example, this whole child tax credit debate, it's not about the child tax credit on its face. It's about increasing, well, first of all, it's actually about winning an intra-party fight as opposed to working with the left. As in, it needs to be a victory within the Republican Party to try and get them to vote for it, as opposed to working with the left to get something done. Second is really is it about, it's difficult to call it social engineering, because also leftist policy is also a form of social engineering. If you have a child tax, the major disagreement, at least between pro-child tax credit people on the right and left, is whether you should have means tests or single mothers. That is, if you do, that's a form of social engineering. If you don't, that's also a form of engineering. The point is that it's about using tax policy to create a society that you have an objective view is the ideal way that you should live. And that if anything, really describes like the major difference with Portnoyism or type of people who might be like him and JD is that like Portnoyism is really, like I said, it's about individuality.
It's very
about
libertarian.
It is deeply socially and economically libertarian, right? So it's about small business. It's about individuality. It's about maximizing the ability of the self to achieve whatever it desires, as opposed to more of like a Judeo-Christian way that JD would look at it, or even there's non-religious ways to look at it too, which is like, no, the family is the individual unit, is the unit which should be maximized, not the individual. That's a long time debate in America, actually. It's a big divide, not just between social libertarian and Republican, or even conservatives, but Christians and non-Christians, or secular. There's various secular debates like within this. So that's kind of the way that I've been looking at this. But I have no doubt that Portnoy and his vision, or not even vision, his lifestyle, like what he perpetuates and all that is more popular amongst men today. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, but I'm not stupid. I know where things are trending.
Yeah. I guess with JD, and I am interested your thought if this is accurate. He talks a lot about, the goals of family creation and centering the family and, making it more difficult to get out of marriages, and, that might be important bedrock. And of course,
I don't know
religion.
If he said that. I know people around him have said it.
He did.
About no
but
fault
anyway,
divorce.
Yeah. I mean, he has floated that it perhaps would be better if people had a more difficult time getting out of divorces. But in any case, he doesn't talk a lot about, he leans into the goals, but he doesn't talk a lot about the specific policies. And perhaps that's because, it would be difficult to sign on to some of those policies in a Republican context because some of them just sound like, lefty progressive policies. But I suspect it's more about, he is not afraid of using government to push in the direction that he wants to see, an anti-Portnoy direction, we'll say. But he believes more in the power of culture to change the things that he wants to change. And by the way, he's not necessarily wrong about that. We were talking before, if your goal is to increase the birth rate, which is one of his goals, if you have this like pro-natalist approach and you look around the world, there's literally nowhere that any policy has actually worked to achieve that goal. And so then you have to look at, okay, well then we need a more religious society where it's like, a religious goal, like part of your whole ethos and culture is centered around kids and family. Versus a government prescription. And so that's my sense. That's my evolving sense of why he actually isn't all that interested in policies, because he thinks cultural impetus and, pushing in an anti-Portnoy direction is probably a more effective way to go.
That's
and
not
why
my
he's so
sense.
interested in like the culture war over the sort of economic pieces that he sometimes talks about.
That's not my sense, just because a lot of his staff are look, Matt Iglesias today said, my sense amongst Democrats is that he has the most serious policy staff amongst Republicans on the Hill. So I don't think that's true. In fact, I think he's very well versed in policy. I think part of the reason you don't necessarily want to take a policy position is because it can be unpopular within your own party. And maybe you learn a thing or two from Donald Trump and Kamala is, hey, the more breathing space you give yourself, the better. I would also say this, he's not the principal. He's learned the hard way on abortion. Like, if he were running his own campaign, I think it would actually be quite different, at least in terms of what you're talking about. But with Trump, being vague is probably a net benefit. You don't necessarily want to talk specifics. You don't want to give the opposition something they can hit you on in terms of a difference between him and Trump. So I don't think that that's correct on the policy front. I think it has much more to do with the dynamics of being a vice president and also being within the Republican Party, where there are huge civil wars like going on. Like, if they do win, there will be a massive fight on this come Tax Cuts and Jobs Act season on where and how to pay for it. And actually, that'll be a little bit more interesting, honestly, about how it will really manifest when the two sides of them actually have power. Senate Republicans and somebody like Vance in the White House, and then which way Donald Trump is going to go.
Yeah, for sure. Well, anyway, that's my intrigue with regard to Portnoy and Vance, is how they are truly like antithesis of each other in terms of politics.
That is
and yet
true.
Today somehow exist in the same coalition.
Well, Dick Cheney and AOC are in the same coalition too, which is part of the fun parts of
Strange
America.
bedfellows.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.